Hey everyone, Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast, and it's Crossover Thursday. We talk with Jake Liscow and James Rapien of Locked On Bengals about all the matchups that play into this game, and I'm going to get into just what the Steelers need to do on both sides of the ball to counteract what the Bengals have been doing and trying to bounce back from their two-game losing streak. We'll talk about all that and more here on Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, football fans? Welcome to another crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Jake Liscow along with James Rapien from Locked On Bengals, joined today by Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, as the Cincinnati Bengals will host the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is the first time these teams are meeting. And it is December 1st by the time these teams are playing. Can't remember the last time the first Bengals-Steelers game was that late in the season. As always, the crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network is presented by Prize Picks, where you can download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5. Chris, as always, we're going to get started with the biggest stories in this game, and we will start this week with the Pittsburgh Steelers. On the offensive side of the ball, what are you looking at when you think about the biggest stories going on around the Pittsburgh Steelers offense?
I think right now it's the thing that Mike Tomlin addressed at the top of the week when he said, we took the mini bye week and we reassessed some things. And the things they reassessed was their failures in the red zone. And that was on both sides of the ball. We'll get to the defense in a little bit, but they're 30th in red zone offense. And that's something that they know that they have to be better at. And they even, for some people out there, oh, well, Justin Fields is a little bit better. And he's like, yeah, he was a little bit better. And that's the problem. And I think that's what they're looking at right now is they haven't been able to finish drives. They've been able to move the ball. They've been able to do that. And they did finish drives for the first 3 weeks, but these last 2 weeks, especially, when they've gotten into the close quarters areas, they've kind of gotten too cute. And I think it's come down to Arthur Smith trying to make plays with Connor Hayward instead of, throwing the ball to George Pickens, or using one of your two really tall, good receiving tight ends that can win jump balls, or using Mike Williams, who you just traded to go get. And I think that's the issue that the Steelers are trying to figure out is how do they divvy up the targets, the usage, those types of things, but also how do they execute it cleanly when they are divvying those up, because they've had good red zone plays that have been called back for penalties. And it's just kind of been that myriad of things. And Mike Tomlin said they addressed it at the top of the week. They worked on it. They said that was something they studied really closely during their mini bye week because they played Thursday night football. And then they said they took an extra practice to implement that and implement it specifically what they plan to do against the Bengals. And then they got back into the regular practice schedule of a 1 p.m. Sunday type of week. So on offense right now, it's can someone step up on offense? Can they find continuity and flow again? They were averaging 30.3 points per game with Russell Wilson in his first 3 contests. He had that big 3-touchdown pass game against the Commanders. And then they got 6 field goals against the Ravens and then scored just 19 points against the Browns, albeit that was an insane blizzard. But still, they want to be a better offense. They this year they have been a better offense. They're very much middle of the league, but they still need to finish better to back up their defense. And that's what they're focusing on the most.
Obviously, Russell Wilson has gotten a lot of the attention nationally, at least, and it's all about the quarterbacks. But at least from my vantage point, the thing that the Steelers have tried to focus on, tried to improve over the past few seasons is the offensive line. How has that unit been so far this year?
I think they've been slightly above water. I think that there's been some good things and some bad things. Zach Frazier last week I felt was like Zach's first bad game. I think, and then he was coming back from injury, but I felt like he most of this year Zach Frazier at center has been awesome for them. He's been an asset. He gives up very little pressure up the middle. He often moves his guy off of the pile when they need to run up the middle. Mason McCormick, a rookie in the same class, 4th round guy. He's been a major asset. He's been a mauler. He still needs to clean up his pass protection, but he's learning really quickly on the job. Broderick Jones is a very much a roller coaster case right now. Last week he was more on the up than the down. But that's the thing is he hasn't been consistent. He's really good as a run blocker when he gets his hands on guys. He can be a good pass blocker when he gets his hands on you, but sometimes he just doesn't, and that's just the most bizarre thing. Isaac Seumalo was injured for a while, came back, and he's had some really good weeks and some not good weeks. Dan Moore is Dan Moore. Really experienced now, much more polished than he used to be. Still the reason why they've drafted offensive tackle in the first round the last 2 years. Troy Fautanu, though, probably not coming back until late December, if he comes back at all this season with his injury. So that's kind of been the tone. James Daniels out for the year, and he was arguably their best offensive lineman in the first couple games before he got hurt. But they've taken steps forward. The younger offensive linemen have set a tone, and that's allowed, when they were playing better as a unit and when Zach Frazier was healthy with them, they were running the ball well. Najee Harris had 3 straight 100-yard games. Since then, it's been kind of back to being quiet because the offensive line's been inconsistent.
It has not been a strength of the Bengals this year to take advantage of potentially questionable offensive lines, let's say. Will be interesting to see how that matchup plays out this week, where it's an AFC North game. So we're thinking about the trenches. And speaking of the trenches, and the biggest story for that Pittsburgh defense, to me, from the outside looking in, it sounds like there's a chance that Alex Highsmith gets back this week and provides a shot in the arm for a defense that's already got one of the more threatening pass rushes the Bengals will face this year. Chris, is that the top of the list for the defense, or is there something else going on?
No, Alex Smith is looking better and better to return throughout the week. We will ultimately have to see how things go down Friday. That's always the determining practice. But he does look like he's getting there, and the Steelers have been kind of confident that he would return. I think there's also confidence that Corey Trice could return to the secondary. He's kind of been that first corner off the bench that lines up on the outside with Joey Porter Jr. And early in the season, he was pretty good when they called upon him. He's just been hurt ever since. But definitely Alex Highsmith is the game changer maker here. And I did a film study in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette showing that, like, hey, right before Alex Highsmith was getting got hurt, they were starting to flip him and TJ Watt more, and as far as moving them around the defensive front, which they had never done. Like in the past, in the Giants game where they played, they just moved TJ Watt 4 times, and like the Giants offensive line was like, wait, you can do that? And it led to him getting just more one-on-one opportunities with just 4 snaps. That was, I went back. TJ Watt had lined up on the right side of the defense 4 times in the last 4 years combined. So him doing it 4 times in one game was revolutionary. But the problem is, since Alex Highsmith's been hurt, they haven't done it. They did it 1 play since. And I think that it's because they got, hey, Nick Herbig, second-year player, Preston Smith, new guy to the system. We're going to let them be comfortable on that side. TJ Watt can just play on his side. And since then, the most he's gotten is 3 pressures and a sack against the Ravens. Didn't get a sack on Jameis Winston. Didn't get a sack on Jaden Daniels, though arguably people say, he should have had a safety when he was like thrown to the ground by his shoulder pads. But I think that the thing is, and I wrote about this, is that the Steelers want to move him around, but they also have to be careful about how they do it, because he is such a huge part of also stopping the run and moving him in the wrong spot. It's got to be timed. It's got to be coordinated to try to force an offense to have to over communicate. If they're throwing extra offensive linemen out there, put them on the opposite side of that and see how they respond to it. And if it's a pass play, do they try to flip the play? Does it mess up the communication? Those are things they're trying to do with Alex Highsmith. It'll be easier for them to do that, because now they'll feel they have 4 capable edge rushers at Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, and Smith as guys that they can rotate in and out and keep fresh throughout a game.
How's Patrick Queen fit into that linebacker room? That was someone I know the Bengals liked pre-draft. He gets drafted by the Ravens and has a few down years, and then Roquan Smith gets there, has a huge year last year, and obviously signed the big deal in Pittsburgh.
If you had asked me about, I'd say a month and a half ago, I'd say very up and down, because he was like, the first game of the season, he missed 4 tackles against the Falcons, and everyone was like, oh boy. And then he wasn't making really a lot of splash plays. But I'd say by like week 6 or so, he really started to lock in. He stopped missing tackles nearly as much. Since the Jets game, I think he's missed 2 total tackles, and he leads the team in tackles. He's been flying all over the field, making a lot of run stuffs, really helping in coverage. He's not a liability there, the way that name a linebacker for the an off-ball linebacker for the Steelers that named Ryan Shazier in the last 7 years, and he's better than that person. And that's been a major asset to him. He's also kind of the all-in-one package, because he communicates. He keeps everyone on the same page, whereas like last year, that had to be a Landon Roberts for most of the year. And the Landon Roberts, good communicator, physical player. Don't ask him to go in coverage, though. And so now they have Patrick Queen, and that allows the Landon Roberts, when he's on the field, to just be, your job is to either it's either go stop the run or rush the quarterback. And then when Peyton Wilson's on the field, your job is to really, Peyton Wilson's extremely flexible. His interception against Lamar Jackson was just an example of how he could run stride for stride with Justice Hill and be be fine doing it. And he's also has, a pretty big body too. But Patrick Queen is the guy that pieces it all together, that keeps everyone on the same page while also being that athletic guy who can stuff the run. He's getting in position a lot faster while also being a guy that helps in coverage. He's been I think that he has completely worked out. It took about, I'd say, like a month and a half, but now he's a very consistent asset for the Steelers.
And now getting the rest of the schedule for the most part against AFC North opponents with whom he is very familiar for Patrick Queen. And we'll see how he does against the Bengals, of course, this weekend. Coming up next, we flip the attention to the Cincinnati Bengals and the biggest stories going on with the beleaguered 4-7 team playing out of Paycor Stadium. That's next on this week's Crossover. This crossover is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And one of the many reasons they're America's #1 sportsbook is the awesome bonuses they have. For example, right now, new customers get a $5 bet right, and they will get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you're looking at what's going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend, you'll see that 2.5-point spread where the Cincinnati Bengals closer to last place, and the Pittsburgh Steelers in first place. The Cincinnati Bengals still favored at home. You can get in on that action or anything else with live betting as well, so you can see the latest stats and play-by-play at the same page where you place your bets at FanDuel.com, where you can join today. And again, if you win that first $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers here with Jake Liscow and James Rapien of Locked On Bengals. Fellas, let's flip to the top stories of the Bengals. And right now, what are you looking at with this Bengals offense that is right now the #1 passing offense, a top 5 scoring offense? They got a lot of things going for them, but this is a 4-7 team, as you mentioned. And it seems like every time they've gone up against a good opponent, they've done enough to put them in the game, and then they just fall just short.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest story, high level, is, oh my God, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have been playing awesome. How are they 4-7? How is it a guy that, to me, for Joe Burrow, you could make an MVP case when you look at the stats and how he's doing things, and yet obviously he's not going to win it because the team is 4-7. Jamar Chase threatening to be the 5th receiver ever to win the Triple Crown. Like, that's a tough thing to digest. And so I think that's the biggest story. And the next question is why? And on offense, part of it is that they are not a consistent running team. I don't think that there's any reason to believe that they're going to run for huge chunks on Sunday against the Steelers, for example. And this offensive line is flawed. They've been without Orlando Brown Jr., who's having arguably his best year, probably his best year of his career. They've been without him for a month now. And the interior of this offensive line, specifically at the guard spot, Alex Kappa and Cordell Volson, they've struggled. So why is Joe taking so many hits? Why have they struggled outside of a few guys? And I would say Chase Brown has been a bright spot as well, on pace for over 1,200 yards from scrimmage. And so you couple it together, it's like, man, they should be 7-4 or 8-3. No, they're 4-7. And I think the biggest story is Joe and Jamar are doing their part and then some, and it still hasn't been enough.
And you pointed this out too, Chris, like those clutch time moments, whether it's the offense or the defense, not to single a unit out here, or the special teams unit where they've been in position to win games and then their kickers let them down this year. Like, they just haven't made that last play against a good team, as you point out. And so if this game goes a certain way, you could see it being close, and then it's, can they overcome that speed bump at the end of the game and make that play to finish the game that they haven't been able to make this year?
And that's what I just keep seeing. Like I remember I watched both those Bengals and Ravens games, and I was just like, man, like the first one, just all the haymakers just thrown in that game, and then the Ravens just come out on top, and I'm like, man, like the second game can't go like that, right? And then it did, and I was like,
exactly
whoa,
like that, right?
Exactly. And I was just like, that is just heartbreaking when it's like when you get a team the first time, and you're like, all right, we'll get them the next time, and you lose in just that, like that close again. That is just rough on you. And then you have the other games, the Chargers game being right there, the Commanders game, the Chiefs game being right there. Those are tough spots, and it's just that's the kind of stuff that like can make or break your season. And so far, it's broken the Bengals. I still think that they can be a little bit dangerous. But I wanted to ask about this offensive line, because that has been the thing that has held back Joe Burrow a lot in his years. He's been injured twice in major ways. But this year, his sack numbers are down. Is that because this offensive line's a lot better, or is that more so Joe Burrow just being Joe Burrow?
I think they're better in pass protection than they've been in the past, especially, again, when you have Orlando Brown Jr. and Amarius Mims out there. You feel pretty good about that. Trent Brown early on, still quality pass protector in this league when healthy. So you couple that with Ted Karras, and I think, they've been solid. But the guards, there were some flashes early where I thought it would be okay. And, they've been pretty bad. And that makes it even tougher, because they are a pass first team, because we know they're not going to run it 40 times on Sunday. Like, even if it's working, you're talking like 20 runs probably if it's working at a high level. That's just not their bread and butter. So you need quality pass protectors. And I think they've gotten that for part of the year. But against these teams like the Ravens, against the Chargers, against the Steelers, Joe is going to get hit. And that's a heck of a way to live, knowing how valuable he is in the league.
I would add on to that Joe Burrow's sack avoidance this year is markedly better than it's been throughout his career. And so I would attribute a good amount of that to Joe as well. The other thing is just that they're getting themselves in these situations where they're dropping back just a ton. And it's putting the pass protectors in difficult situations, to say the least, where they're a little bit one-dimensional. And it makes it a little bit easier for opposing defensive linemen to get after the quarterback.
I hear that. And I think that's where you want to keep teams in less predictable situations, two-dimensional football, as Pat Narduzzi, Pitt's head coach, would often say in his press conferences. Let's flip to the defense real quick, because this defense, I think, has been the unit that's let this team down more often than not, or more often than the other unit. Trey Hendrickson, awesome year, getting after it. But the secondary, you lose a key player in DJ Turner. Dax Hill's hurt, and it just puts a group that was already a bit, shorthanded, even more shorthanded. And you still have Mike Hilton. Steelers fans still remember him. He's still a playmaker. He still goes out there and he gives everything he got. But what is the thing that has been, and I get this from both of you, what is the thing that has most plagued this defense, and what is the thing that you think could be the factor that gets them over the hump in the good games they do have left in them?
Oh, what has been the issue? Well, it's been a bunch of them. I mean, that's what's tough is you when you lose so many close games, it's been one thing or another thing or another. Their biggest issue, and again, this is not discounting the secondary and Cam Taylor-Britt, but the pass rush. It's Trey Hendrickson and no one else. And that is not the way to live. And the Steelers fans listening and watching right now understand that, because the Steelers can just throw guys. And Highsmith goes down, and then Herbig comes in, and then Herbig gets hurt, and Highsmith comes back, and then they're all together. And the interior depth that the Steelers have. The Bengals don't have that. They have either youth, inexperience, unproven guys, or a guy in Sam Hubbard who just doesn't look like the same guy that he was a few years ago. And so when you mix that together around Trey Hendrickson, and you're not heating up opposing quarterbacks, that's how Jaden Daniels throws 3 incompletions against you on Monday Night Football in a game where you just needed one stop and you could win. That's how you struggle to stop Lamar Jackson in 2 must-win games, it felt like. That's why at least partially why Patrick Mahomes has enough time on 4th and 16 to loft the ball up and give his team a chance. Like all these close games, there's been a moment where the defense could make a play, and they, outside of Trey Hendrickson, just don't have the playmakers. And that's happened time and time and time again.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier about finishing games, not just on the offensive side of the ball. Even against the Chargers, Mike Hilton had a chance for a pick six that could have essentially put the game away. And it's a great play to break on the ball and break the pass up, but you got to catch that ball. You got to catch the interception opportunities when you have those opportunities. And as James mentioned, the pass rush just hasn't been good enough for the Bengals this year, and certainly an Achilles heel there. But I think there's a bit of a talent drain too that we've seen over the last few years that's catching up to them in the way they want to play versus the way they have to play given the personnel available to them. Coming up next, guys, let's switch gears. Let's talk about some of the keys to victory in this game, a very important game for the Steelers at the top of the division and for the Bengals to try to keep their season going and some of those slim playoff hopes alive. We'll finish the show there coming up next.
But first, I'll remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app that you need to download to your phone today to get tickets to all your favorite live events. Winter is coming, and now is your chance to get all to your favorite holiday events, to get to your favorite concerts, shows, and, of course, sporting events. Whether you're a Steelers fan, a Bengals fan, the University of Cincinnati, Xavier, all those events you can get to right with Game Time, where you can use Game Time picks to sort through the tickets with the app itself and find the best tickets available. Whether you want club seats at the big game or floor seats at the big concert, Game Time is the best way to go. Plus, Game Time offers the best price guarantee. That means you'll always get the best price, because if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
Guys, let's dive into the keys to victory in this crossover episode presented by Prize Picks, where you can download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your $5 play. I'm Jake Liscow along with James Rapien from Locked On Bengals, and we've got Chris Carter representing the Steelers and Locked On Steelers in this crossover. And Chris, as we do, let's get into those keys to victory here. From the Pittsburgh perspective, what needs to go right for the Steelers to come out on top in this one?
One, the offense just needs to be competent in this game. And when I say competent, they need to finish drives, prove that those red zone woes are behind them, move the football, control the football, keep the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands, and actually come away with touchdowns. If they're able to do that, the Steelers have shown they can put together game plans that can slow down Joe Burrow. But we've all seen the game where, it's the Steelers still ended up on top, but they forced 5 turnovers in a game once against Joe Burrow, and he still came back to force overtime in the end. Why? Because that offense couldn't possess the football. This Steelers offense, much better at possessing the football. So the first thing, possess the football, control the ball. Right now, the Steelers are the best time possession right now. That's key number 1 for the Steelers. I'd say key number 2, if you're looking at the defense, you gotta get Joe Burrow off schedule, whether that's bump and run in coverage, taking away the things that he likes to do, or getting pressure, which I think will be the biggest key of those 3 things I just said. That's going to be the factor as far as keeping Joe Burrow off schedule. He's going to get his. I think that the Steelers kind of acknowledge that on a lot of game plans, like, hey, there's certain players you can't necessarily stop from doing everything or scoring it all, but you can knock them off schedule, and I'll give your offense time to build a lead and put them in behind the 8 ball, so that eventually the Bengals are like, well, the game plan we had for this game can't fully apply right now because we're not in the situation we thought we'd be. So those are my 2 top keys. And if I guess I had to come up with the third one, they need to get back to being able to run the football. They have not run the football well the past few weeks. It was looking very good before Zach Frazier's injury. He got hurt, and then it sort of fell off a little bit. If they can get back to running the football, that'll help with the time possession thing. But that was supposed to be a big identity for them this year, and it has been at times during their 5-game win streak. They had some moments like that, but it hasn't been of the past couple weeks, and that's something they have to get back to here. What are some of the Bengals' keys?
Well, I think key number 1, first and foremost, and you could say it every week, but I certainly think over the past couple of weeks you saw Joe Burrow play at a really high level, and he gets the snot kicked out of him against the Ravens. Same thing against the Chargers. and it's protect Joe. Find a way. I think Orlando Brown Jr. has a good shot to come back. We'll see if he does, if he's able to play. Practiced on Wednesday. How close to 100% will he be? He will not be 100%. I can confidently say that. So how close will he be? Will he be effective? Can they keep Joe upright and limit that Steelers defensive front? I think that's number one. It just has to be. Two is defensively, find a way to early on create some big plays. And that could be Russell Wilson interception. That could be Jalen Warren fumble. That could be Najee Harris fumble. That could be a tipped pass because George Pickens runs 2 yards too far to the right and the ball goes up in the air. And Josh Newton, who's going to make his first NFL start, is able to pick it off. Like I think that's it is big plays. And then 3, to me, it's defense again. Finding a way to not let, and Jake's been on this, the moonball thing. You cannot give up these big plays, regardless if you're Cam Taylor-Britt or a rookie in Josh Newton or Geno Stone. Doesn't matter. This secondary, this pass rush, it all has to come together and make sure it limits those big plays for the Steelers, whether it's the run or the pass for that matter. I think that those are the 3 things, and there are a bunch of things. I mean, I honestly, Chris, I think about this team and where they're at, and I could see the Steelers winning this game in a bunch of different ways, which means that the Bengals, that there are a lot of keys to stir the drink, so to speak, to get them to a win.
There's also just this, not to talk about the kickers too much, but man, there's a kicking disparity between these teams this year. And for all this discussion about what needs to go right on offense and defense, we've seen the Bengals stay in games against everybody but Philly this year because their offense and defense have done enough. And in a lot of those games, the Bengals kicking unit has let them down. Meanwhile, you got a kicker in Pittsburgh who has been lights out this year. So there's a kicking disparity in this game where previously I would have felt very confident with the Bengals and Evan McPherson coming into this year. And lately, that's certainly not been the case, to the point that we've got stories about, what's going on with the holding and kick and snapping operation, and learning about revolutions on the snap to make sure the laces are caught by the holder in the right, like it's that level of conversation around what's going wrong with the Bengals kicking game right now. So I'm just going to throw that one out there as another one, because it really has cost the Bengals. As you mentioned, Chris, some of the games you've watched this year and against some other teams this year where they're just not getting those clutch kicks when they need them, in addition to other clutch plays. So I'm just throwing out the specialist there is another one that the Bengals need to kick better.
Yeah, in 2 games against both Harbaughs. The Charger game, Evan McPherson misses 2 kicks in the 4th quarter. And then week 5 against the Ravens, you outplay the Ravens, you get a gift in overtime, you should win in the hold. Like just those 2 plays alone, or 3 plays, are just game changers, momentum changers.
That's a lot of factors there. And I think that's the thing, is that this is still a divisional game. As much as, like, I think Bengals fans are down, Steelers fans are they're always down after one loss. It don't matter what their record is. They're just they want to be negative. But I think there's this want to kind of say, no, we are the more miserable right now. But at the end of the day, like, I think this is still going to be a tough divisional game. We'll both get to our predictions in the next episode that we each do. But I still think these are 2 teams. They know each other well. They both have different weaknesses that each of them can strike at. And that's where I think it's going to come down to, is who can use their strength first in this game to set the pace.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that the Bengals are favored in this game, despite what the standings say, despite what they've done against teams with winning records this year, despite what they've done in close games. But despite all of that, I think that where Vegas isn't totally out to lunch on this is that the Bengals, because of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown, and because Trey Hendrickson can take over games sometimes, we saw him do that against the Chiefs, and that's the reason the Bengals were right there with the Chiefs defensively in that game, long time ago now. But you get the point. There's the Bengals can be better than their record, but they haven't been able to finish games. And in a game that could be close, because these teams are so familiar with each other, and it is an AFC North game, and it isn't Cincinnati, all of that stuff comes into what should be another good one in the AFC North. It's just crazy that we're not talking, Chris, here until December. I mean, what are these schedule makers doing? It's so late in the year.
Hard Knocks, man. They're all up. They're taking up our parking spaces. They're all over the place. They're extra cameras in every scrum. I hope HBO and Max, they hope they get their money's worth for this stuff, because we certainly are being accommodating here. Thank you for watching this Crossover Thursday episode. Whether you watch it on YouTube or listen to it on your favorite podcasting apps, we appreciate everyone. We hope you've had a very happy Thanksgiving and are enjoying family time. But do know we do have a Friday episode coming out as well. Jenna Harner joins me right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast as we give our final thoughts and looking into that Steelers-Bengals matchup with all of our Week 13 NFL predictions. It's going to be a fun episode on Friday. Tune in right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, just like you can find me tomorrow right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.